Cool. So I think we're live on YouTube. Perfect. Turn the volume down so I don't hear my voice and start the recording. Here we go. All right. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today, we have two incredible guests for you. Dr. Rob Maldonado and Debi Maldonado are respectively the president and CEO of the Center of Jungian Positive Psychology, providing world-class personal development and coach training that transforms people's lives through live seminars and multimedia online courses. Dr. Rob is recognized internationally as a human behavior and relationship expert. He earned his Ph.D. in counseling psychology from the University of Wisconsin and an M.A. in clinical psychology from the University of Texas. His academic training includes neuropsychology, neurodevelopment, social neuroscience, and multicultural psychology. Debi is a master Jungian life coach, instructor, and the author of the bestselling book, Let Love In. Open your heart and mind to attract your ideal partner. She is a columnist for Inc.com magazine and a frequent speaker on women's empowerment and leadership. She has been featured by ABC News, ABC Radio Network, Fox, NBC, Cosmopolitan, and many others. Today, they have helped thousands of people around the world improve their personal relationships, increase their income, create their dream businesses, and discover their purpose in life through their deep, multi-sensory processes based on Jungian psychology and Eastern traditions. Their mission is to raise the bar in the personal development industry to provide a higher level of training with more depth, real psychology, and science-based solutions that truly transform a person into their true self. Welcome to the show, Debi and Rob Maldonado.
It's great to be here, Matt.
Yeah,
Yes.
awesome. Really great pleasure to be with you guys. And yeah, thanks for that great intro. I wish my dad could have heard that.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, it's funny because sometimes I do well with them and other times I didn't. And this time I had to go live on YouTube and I could hear myself talking. So it took like extra focus to like try to put out the words and get them right. But, you know, I had a chance to look at your guys' work before coming on the show, and even just reading the bio, it's really incredible what you guys are doing. And I think, especially in the personal development age that we're in, I love the last sentence, to raise the bar, to, you know, have it science-based and practical and effective. And that's always what I'm looking for myself. So it's a privilege to have you guys here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
We try to make it raise the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I know we can go really in depth. We have two incredible people on. Maybe you guys can help guide the show. We can explore a lot of topics, but where do you guys want to start? Do you want to give a little bit about your backgrounds and then dive into what it is you guys are doing?
That sounds good.
Sure. Do you want me to start? Okay. Well, my background is I've done personal development since I was in my early 20s. And I really felt like in my early life, I was trying to meet the love of my life, trying to figure out my dating life, and, you know, just reading a lot of self-help books and trying to find my way, and moved to Colorado and did a lot of like all the stuff out there with the crystals and the chakras and, you know, the way out stuff, and then the practical psychology, and just all that searching for answers. And I was in the corporate world, and all the time I kept thinking, I really want to do this for a living. I wish I could like teach people like about themselves. And so I got laid off is a nicer word, from my corporate job. And I ended up becoming a hypnotherapist for a while, and doing that, I met Rob, and I worked a lot with the unconscious. And then we started talking about Jungian psychology. And I have like kind of the novices, the layman terms of, you know, how I think about life. And he was more educated in the psychology part of it. So with the two of us together, I feel like we made a really great combo in delivering the really deep material in a way that could be practical. And I just, you know, we market to women. So I'm a woman, so I think I'm an expert in that. And how I'm really started out just helping people find love. And now we help people, we train coaches and we help them build their businesses and work with a lot of entrepreneurs in really living their dreams, but in a spiritual grounded way where you're not just chasing the money, you're really living your purpose.
Nice.
And that's my part of the story. Rob will tell his.
Yeah, the other half. My journey started early in college. I originally wanted to be an artist, so I found Jung's work as a creative person, and was really fascinated by his idea of the collective unconscious and how these images arise from the unconscious, fully formed already. I kind of loved that so much that I decided to switch careers and go into psychology. So I started doing clinical work. I got a master's in clinical psychology, and then around that time, neuropsychology was really coming into its own. And I said, I have to just dedicate some time to learning more about this. So I went to University of Wisconsin and focused a lot on the current research that was coming out at that time on autism, neurodevelopment, gene environment interaction, and how those things kind of shape our mind, our way of seeing the world. Debbie introduced me to coaching, and that totally blew my mind, because then I saw, well, here's a way to apply psychology in a completely different way, in a much more non-clinical way, where people can use it in their everyday lives and use it to transform their lives in a very practical way. And then with the technology, of course, with the internet, the combination was just too much to resist. I said, let's just do this
Sign
full
me up.
time. Yeah, let's do this full time and really make it work. And, for the last 5-6 years, we've been just doing it, and, traveling all over the world, meeting people like yourself, and just talking about this idea of using Jungian individuation in a coaching model.
And those of people who don't know who Carl Jung is, he studied, he was around the time of Freud, when Freud first came up with the talking cure, which is now modern therapy, modern psychotherapy. And where they diverged is that Freud was an atheist, and he didn't believe he thought the mind is kind of like, the subconscious was like a repository, like a computer, and there really wasn't life after that. And Jung saw the mind as having a personal aspect like Freud, but he also saw that there's a collective unconscious, that there's a part of us that's connected to everything and consciousness. And so he was more of a mystical person. So they always call him the father of the New Age movement, because he's inspired so much, the word synchronicity and
Introvert,
extrovert, and the shadow work that he does. So at archetypes, working with archetypes. So if people aren't familiar with Carl Jung himself, they've heard these terms before, and they all come from him. And it's just his work is so deep and profound. It's just like we have enough material to last us 10 lifetimes to teach. So really great stuff. And not many people know about how practical it can be. I mean, a lot of what people wrote about Jung, I've read a lot of the females that wrote about Jung too. And it's, Joseph Campbell, he talks about the power of myth. And a lot of it is a lot of mythological stories, which are great. But how do we apply that in the modern world? How do we take that really great knowledge and apply it in? How do I get the job I want? How do I have the love I want? How do I, be happy in this modern world with technology? Like, how do we do that? And that's really what we're about, is taking this deep, profound information and knowledge and helping people use it in their life.
Well, that sounds amazing. all of it sounds good. Well, you kind of led into my first question, is like, why Jungian psychology? Of all the stuff out there, like, why did you guys choose that? You answered it a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted something that addressed this question. We know from really from ancient wisdom traditions on consciousness, and from current the new consciousness studies, that we're dealing with not a material universe, but a conscious universe. That consciousness is a fundamental property of the way we experience the universe. In other words, you cannot experience the universe without consciousness, and therefore it is the foundation of it. Uh, Now, Western science still buys into this idea that it's a material universe, and that our brain somehow, the billions of neurons interacting in the brain somehow spark this thing called consciousness into being. But that more and more is being disproven. And essentially the foundation, the idea that the universe is fundamentally a conscious experience made out of consciousness, that is coming to the forefront. So we wanted a psychology and needed a psychology that addressed the individual's transformation, meaning the going from identifying with the persona ego or as a personality, to really understanding themselves as conscious beings. And the psychology that we saw that addressed that question was Carl Jung's individuation process. He really foresaw kind of this coming age of consciousness that is now occurring. Of course, he was working back in Victorian times with Freud, and up until the 60s, really, he was working. And we've learned so much about the brain now, and how our senses work and how we create these realities in our mind. But the basic foundations of his psychology still hold water. That this experience that we call our subjective experience of our qualia, the awareness of ourselves and being in the world, is essentially a conscious experience, and that the misidentification of ourselves as ego, as like just identifying with a body, with a persona, that is a temporary state. We're not meant to reside there all our lives. Jung saw that around the age of 30 and beyond that, people start to question, is that all there is? Is this individual experience of myself all I'm meant to be? And that process starts what he saw as a natural, innate process in us, which is individuation. And individuation simply meant or means becoming your true self, becoming your higher self, transcending your personal history. So beyond the personal history, there is an experience for us that is the true self. What do you call the true self? That process we saw as the key to giving individuals a way to transform their lives in a personal, psychological way, without just kind of buying into the idea of meditation, the idea of consciousness, because always the question was, well, how do I do that? How do I wake myself up? How do I transform myself? And Jungian psychology really fit the bill for that.
And for me, it's as a woman, I find myself very creative and very I love intuition. I love working with visualization and that aspect of my mind, that creative part of my mind. And I felt like Jungian psychology really allows a woman to really tap into her natural gifts of that creativity. Men, it'll help them get more in touch with that aspect, the feminine side of them. But for women, we're naturally built to like kind of explore this creative force within us. And there's just so much more to life than just paying bills and getting to work. that there's this richer experience of consciousness that we can have in our everyday life that's actually very, as Jung would say, numinous. It's like a numinous quality that we can have every day.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I can only say that, my research that Carl Jung came as like a godfather of many of the ideas of just very practical knowledge. So I'm definitely aware of that. And I'm so excited to get into like some of the practical stuff. I wish we had all day to talk about them. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm because usually some people will give me sample questions and I looked at your like talking points. I'm like, I want to talk about all of this for like weeks on end. But I think the most exciting one for me at the present time would be like, in what way are we working towards, is everyone working towards their spiritual peak? Like, what does that mean? And can you offer like a tool to help somebody move towards that aim?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about just the way we come into the world, we kind of we know we're not a blank slate. We know we're kind of prepared for language. We're prepared for symbols. We're prepared to perceive the world in a certain way through our senses, all kind of inherent, biologically, evolutionary wise. We are we fit the environment. We fit the environment like a lock and key, essentially. Now, what happens after that is that as we experience the world, our mind absorbs these experiences, these early experiences, and takes them as templates for future survival. And this is automatically, this is done unconsciously, as Freud or Jung would say. Unconsciously, we absorb the world early on and say, this is the way I'm going to have to live in the world. So we create a persona. Now, this persona is a type of mask, according to Jung. It's a type of, let's say, a facade that we put up in order to interact with the world. So we cannot interact with the world without a persona, without this filter of like a type of identity, a type of mask that other people can identify. And then we use that also as a filter, as a way of saying, this is important to me, this is not important to me. So that piece, it has been verified by, let's say, behaviorism, neuroscience. All the new sciences have pretty much verified that concept, that we are conditioned by our early experiences to perceive and to defend ourselves and to kind of interact with the environment in a certain way. So up to that point, everything is fine. But Jung says what happens then is if you're not able to examine that conditioning, if you're not able to transform it in a conscious way, what that does, it keeps you stuck, because it keeps you using that same template that you received from your environment. And it's an interpretation, essentially. It's a mental interpretation that you made about reality and yourself. So if you go by the default mode in your life, you will simply play out the same pattern, little variation here and there, but essentially you will perceive relationships, you will see opportunities based on that early pattern that was laid down in your early childhood. Now, that's not freedom, essentially, because you're essentially just playing out a conditioned pattern that your mind absorbed incidentally by the circumstances that you grew up in. So he says, if you want to really free your mind and be free of your past conditioning, you have to undergo this process of individuation. You have to confront your shadow. And for Jung, really the shadow was simply the things that didn't fit our persona, that they didn't fit our survival strategy, our needs in the particular environment that we grew up in. All those things lay in the personal unconscious. So he says that initial confrontation with the shadow, that coming to terms with the things that we ignored, we pushed away, we said, that's not me, that doesn't help me survive. That initial confrontation then begins the process of individuation, which means it's going to transform you from the inside out into what you're really meant to be, which is your full potential, your, all your creativity, all your aspirations that are far beyond, let's say, your personal history. They're not necessarily part of your past experiences, but you're becoming free to consciously choose them, to consciously reinvent yourself in a sense. That is the process of individuation right there. So in a practical way, the first part of that transformation is looking at your personal history, but looking at it in a way where you understand its nature. You understand that it doesn't necessarily define you. It doesn't have to define you. You're free to choose beyond it.
Well, another practical thing to look at is that there's probably things in your life that you want to create, whether it's you want to write a book or you want to start a business or you want to find a great relationship. And your mind is basically reflecting your default, which is what you've been, Rob calls it that, all those strategies, we call it the survival kit. You have your survival kit and it's basically your comfort zone. And the psyche's set up to resist those new things you want. And so a lot of people think, well, if they try to do something and they fail, that they're not supposed to have that thing, or it's too hard, or maybe it's not meant to be. But what's happening is they're just seeing their own inner resistance because they've identified with a certain. So for example, if you've always identified with not having a lot of money, for you to have a lot of money, that would be a blow to your persona because that's kind of who you built yourself around. And so when you go out and start a business or try to have success, that could get in the way of your inner conflict with success, or seeing yourself as a success will get in the way of that. Some people have spiritual conflicts with when I talk about spiritual, sometimes it's the conditioning around religion or spirituality. Early life religion, all the early messages about what is a good person, what is a bad person, all those moral questions sometimes are still in our unconscious, even though consciously we don't believe them anymore. On a conscious level, they could still be interacting with us. And here's the key, it's mostly unconscious. So we can't really see it. And so when we bump up against, the best way to see our shadow is through other people. And so I would say, look at the most annoying person in your life. Think of someone who's really just like, why does this person have to be that way? Or a type of person that always annoys you and you just want to avoid them. They are representing an aspect of your shadow. They are representing an aspect of who you don't want to be. And by denying that part of yourself, you're limiting your life in some way. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to be selfish like that person. But if you say, well, where in my life is my fear of being selfish getting in the way of me having what I want? And then you start to see, oh, wait, I've been conditioned to give too much and not take a lot. And because I've had this idea that my persona can't be selfish. And then you see people that overgive and they give away their stuff for free, and they, and they're always struggling with money because they don't want to be selfish and they don't even realize that that's what they're doing. And so that's what this work is really about, is becoming more self-aware, not healing the past or thinking there's something to heal about how that condition occurred because it's perfect, but seeing what is making you conditioned to act a certain way, and how can you act from that freedom of your true self, which is there's no bounds in that place. There's no rules. There's no certain set of behaviors that are acceptable or unacceptable. You're free to become who you want to be. And for most of us, we're not going to abuse that power. We're not going to be, go out and rob a bank or, blow up a building. We're going to use it in a very positive way. So a lot of people are like, oh, don't want to go into the shadow or the power. Most of us, we just have normal in little insecurities that get us in the way of getting what we want.
Well, I think those are, yeah. Yeah, those are all really great points. I think that, there's a lot of discussion around shadow work and, the idea of fake it till you make it, or visualization, or, you're like, it's actually common in a lot of pro athletes. I was coaching an NFL player for a little bit, and I said, hey man, like, how close is the show Ballers to real life? He's like, it's actually pretty close. It's a crazy show. But you think about a consciousness from coming from a lower income place, getting tons and tons of money, and then buying a bunch of stuff and then blowing it is a very common thing in pro athletes. They don't know what to do after. So I think I'd just be curious about, like, what do we do to change that? Even if we become aware, we're like, okay, you know what? I have a limiting mindset around money. I have a limiting mindset around self-worth, which is really common, really limiting mindset around love. Like, I'm not worthy of love. You've received abuse or whatever. And, I know some incredible people that they're like, yeah, I was in an abusive relationship for like 2 years. I was like, what? It's like, why didn't you just leave? And obviously it's not easy like that. It's not something that's easy to do. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about, like, the psychology of success or transforming once you're aware you have a limitation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Jung says like this. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, but you will think it's fate. So he's saying, until you're able to really integrate your shadow and to bring that all that conditioning from your past into awareness, it's going to determine how much money you make, what kind of relationships you experience, how you see the world. But you will think, well, that's just the way things work out for me all the time, right? It's fate. I'm just fated to live in poverty, or I'm just fated to have bad relationships, and it'll feel like there's nothing you can do. But by the same token, if you're able to bring this to awareness, this past conditioning, this shadow element, you're free from it. Because what you're going to do is you're going to see its true nature, and its true nature is that it's a type of projection. So in essence, that imprint that we get from those early experiences becomes a type of projector that then we project reality out there, and we see it out there. It appears to us to be out there, but it's essentially our mind that we're observing. And there'll be characters, there'll be people that play out these roles for us, but essentially we're handing them the script. We're giving them the script and saying, you're going to play the bad guy. You're going to play the woman that cheats on me. You're going to play the guy that rips me off and takes all the money, and I end up with nothing. Now, that's an incredible concept, but we know from consciousness studies and from ancient wisdom traditions, that's very much in alignment with the way the ancient seers saw consciousness. It is Maya. It is a type of illusion that the mind creates, and it appears to us to be external. In other words, it appears to have this independent functioning outside of mind, but it's an appearance. The absolute reality is that our consciousness is creating what we call the universe, including our social environment, including the characters that play out in our everyday lives. It is our mind. It is our very mind that we're observing. When we understand that, then we can work with it, because now we're operating on a true level, on an absolute reality, instead of buying into the projection and thinking that things are happening to me outside of my mind.
Well, I think a lot of people kind of have this idea that they're creating their life and they're creating these things. And I think they have a hard time trying to, how do I change that? How do I change this projection? And I think what Rob said is really important. I think people skip over this point so much, that you're creating it all. You really are creating it all. There's no outside reality outside of your mind. And so you have to accept that first before you can even approach how to change it. And so I say that the best way to start becoming aware is to watch where you're emotionally charged. Like I said, people that trigger you are really the first step, because they're really showing you your mind, and they're showing you where you're stuck. And it's not always a direct reflection, but a lot of times it's like, if you could just be a little like them, you would have everything you wanted. And I want to address your point about people that have that low self-esteem or the limited thinking about themselves. We are never, ever, ever going to change that. It's always going to be there because our ego, that's its nature. So we have to learn to identify what part of our mind we're having conversations with. So if you're having a conversation with your ego, it's always going to tell you you suck. You're never going to do anything. You're never going to make anything in your life. Look what you've done. And then when you do stuff, it's never going to be enough. And a really great tool that people can use, and this is something I recommend to do every single day, is spend 5 minutes in the morning as soon as you wake up and watch your thoughts. Step back and imagine coming from the vantage point of the witness. There's an awareness in you that's there, as well as the thinker, like, because there has to be someone to hear the thinker, right? So there has to be a listener. So you be in touch with that listener, and the more space you can put between the talker and the listener and the awareness, the more you're going to start to feel more in your true self, more your power. And the thinker is just the ego. It's just strategizing and, thinking the world's external. And it's just coming up with conspiracy theories to tell you how terrible everything is. And you either you jump in with the wave. And that's why meditation, a lot of times they say, it's like when you get caught up in the thoughts, you take a step back. I mean, it sounds like such a simple technique, but it is so profound. And then the shadow work helps you become more aware of how you're projecting. And then when you are aware of it, it's just like becoming aware of it you're not trying to fix it. You're just saying, oh, I understand. That's my conditioning. And then you make a decision outside of it. So it could still be that you could still feel not good enough, but don't let that stop you in going for what you want. You're like, I'm feeling like crap right now, but I'm going to go and do this talk in front of 5,000 people, but I know I feel kind of not good enough. It's okay. Like, that part of you doesn't have to be pushed away, that tension. You just let it be there. You just don't allow it to be driving you anymore. And I think most of the personal development work I did in the beginning was about fighting that voice. It's such a struggle, and it was always frustrating because you're just fighting with yourself. And if you just kind of not give it any energy, it stops feeding. It's like its energy kicks back to you and you're kind of caught up in it. And meditation is a really great tool to start being more in control of that thinking mind. And then you can access all the other parts of your psyche and the creativity and understand that. But the shadow work really helps. It's hard. I could do a really quick way to work with the shadow. Think about 3 of your best qualities that you think are you. Like, maybe you're smart, maybe you're involved, maybe you are a genuine, authentic, those things. And then whatever that opposite of those qualities are in your shadow. And those are the things that control your life, not being those things. And so if you're aware of that, oh, that's me not wanting to be greedy, or that's me not wanting to feel guilty, or that's me not wanting to feel insecure, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm aware of that. Now it's brought up to consciousness. Now I know what to do with it, instead of it like running under like a background on our computer, the little programs that you don't know are eating up your memory, that you're bringing it out. And now you can delete it. You could turn it away. You could ignore it. And you're more in control of your life.
Wow. Well, you said a lot there that I want to touch on, because I think it's all fantastic. The first thing is in meditation, which I've done a lot of. It's fascinating to think. Most people think that they're their mind or ego. Then you step back and you're observing the thing. And then you think, who is the thing observing the thing? And how many fractal layers go back that way? And then you have a direct experience where you're no thing and you're just kind of something else, which is also fascinating. And I think that's, I forget how Jung describes it. What's the universal mind? What's his word for that?
The collective unconscious.
Yes, exactly. So then you actually can experience that directly, which is fascinating. Then we're diving back into shadow stuff. And a new friend of mine, Dan, has been studying with these incredible Tao teachers that came from Taiwan, apparently. And they said Nelson, British Columbia needs the Tao. They came here. These are legit master teachers. They took one character from one line and spent 2.5 hours on it and talked about like integration, spirit. Like it was just a masterclass on one character, and it was all super legit. And one of the things that Dan spoke about was just going to the Oregon eclipse and how and I was there, and it was a really incredible experience. But for him, it was like when the sun came over, the moon. How the heck does that work? Moon, sun gets covered, goes all black.
Covers the sun.
Yeah, the moon covers the sun.
The moon covers the sun. Yes, okay, that makes sense. And then it was night sky. But for him, it was like the idea that, it was the shadow saying, look at me. Stop trying to kill me. Stop trying to kill the ego. We're always trying to kill our egos, remove our shadow, that I am just perfect and it's all great all the time. But it's just like, just accept me. And even love me, just integrate that. And that allows you to become whole. That's the yin yang symbol. It's both. It's not saying you don't exist. It's saying, I recognize you. I prefer this. I'm going to go in this direction, but you are also a part of me and a necessary part of me. Because if I didn't realize that running people over with my car didn't feel good, then I would know that I want to stay on the lines because I don't want to hurt people. You know what I mean? It can guide you towards what you prefer in this experience of reality. And the last thing I'll just kind of share and give it back to you guys is like the concept of like law of attraction, and we're creators. I think a fundamental thing that I see across the board for people I perceive as awake or woke or whatever you want to call that is the woke word, which actually apparently came from just like black and white culture. Black woman told me about that. She was just like, no, it actually has to do with you being aware and you're not. I was like, oh, and now we've taken it into consciousness and all kinds of other things. It's a side note because she's the one who actually explained it to me. I was like, oh, I thought I had to do with something else. But the concept that you 100% create your reality. And if you do not accept that, then you cannot have the power of a creator to make a change.
That's absolutely. Right.
And I think about David Goggins, who has an incredible story, this Navy SEAL, just like his life, abused as a child, the stuff he's put his body through, running on broken legs, like it's just ridiculous. But he went through a lot of challenge. So I guess I'm going to put it back to you guys in the sense of the one question that is on here that I love is, how would you define this reality based on the latest neuroscience? That's a fascinating question because I don't know what is going on here. And two, we're creating reality, right? Like I'm creating reality. Okay, I believe that. Got it. Check. All this crap that I don't like, and I'm in a scenario that also is like limiting in certain ways that I want to modify, right? How do I embody the things? How do I get there? I'm like, okay, I'm aware, got a limiting belief, or I hate myself, I always get crap relationships or whatever. How do I begin to embody that once I've become aware of those limitations? And you can feel free to rant about anything that I just said there.
Okay. Yeah. So you talk about the neuroscience, doctor.
Sure. One of my favorite topics because it is. I think we're such a unique generation that we have access to both Western science, and we're able to peer inside the brain and observe what it's doing and try to correlate it with our conscious awareness, right? The quality of our subjective experience. And we also have access to all this ancient knowledge, like you were talking about, right? People that bring this ancient wisdom that has been around forever and has really stood the test of time. It is a wisdom that just as human beings was kind of born with us, right? That's what defines us as human beings, is that we're curious about our own experience in the world. Why are we here? What is this creation that we're observing in and that we're moving in? So early on, we saw this, that a lot of the ancient wisdom traditions, they were meant to be applied in a kind of a monastic environment, meaning they're going to renounce the world. They're not going to mess with it. They're not necessarily interested in creating, or they're not interested in success in the world. Although there are exceptions, right? The Gita does talk about artha, the ability to be successful in the world. But overall, in general, most of the systems, Buddhism, Hinduism, even Taoism, their ideas, why mess with the world? Why interact with it when we know it's illusory? It's essentially Maya. It's essentially an appearance of things that, for all practical purposes, it does not exist except in our own interpretation of it. In the West, it's been the opposite. The subjective experience and the weighing and the measuring of material experience has been the central point of science. A scientific fact is essentially a mathematical formula that can be applied over and over, and therefore it's been very successful in creating rocket ships and creating computers and creating this incredible material culture that we see all around us. So now that we've kind of come to this point where we're at the crossroads, where we have both. Now we have these computers, we have spaceships and all this stuff, but we also have this knowledge of consciousness. How do we integrate those two things? How do we form, let's say, a practical spiritual psychology that can meet our needs? Because it's essentially like this: just because we have technology does not mean we don't need the transcendent function in us, that ability to transcend our personal history and our ego and get in touch with a deeper reality. That's been the part of our humanity that, a lot of people, when they lose that, they lose the thread of meaning in their life. They feel like life is empty, life is meaningless. I mean, because if you're saying the universe is simply this amalgamation of atoms and molecules, well, what kind of meaning is that? You're not going to find meaning in that, because it's just a jumble of material elements moving around chaotically. On the other hand, if we say, well, consciousness is the meaning-making apparatus in us, it's what creates meaning. But you have to wield it. You have to master it. Then we're getting closer to that balance of, understanding the way our mind works and the way our minds create this reality, and also applying it in a meaningful way. So this is the task, and this is a challenge for our generation, essentially. Can we take both elements? Can we embrace both? Because we cannot deny the technology anymore. We know it's here to stay, and we know people are going to use it for good or bad. Whatever they're going to use it for, they're going to use it. Can we infuse it with that wisdom that the consciousness gives us? Can we infuse the technology? Can we infuse society? Can we infuse the way we work and the way we interact with each other with that deeper meaning of a spiritual reality? And I agree, it's a big challenge, but people like yourself who are consciously working on this, right? They're asking questions, they're thinking about it, they're talking to other like-minded individuals. The answer is going to come through there, and this is the kind of the balancing act that Jung gives us, is that he sees that the wisdom inherent in consciousness studies and understanding is only alive when the individual embodies it. Otherwise, it's only dead words in books and scriptures. When we take it upon ourselves and we start to question it, and we start to really kind of wrestle with it, that's the living spirit right there. The answer is going to come from there, from that interaction with it, from that wrestling with it, that kind of kind of taking the answer from it. It's like stealing the fire from the gods. It is very much that we're going to have to do it as a challenge, as really the biggest challenge for our generation. Can we infuse wisdom and technology and make it home before dinner?
Well, also you didn't talk about the neuroscience of it, which is that, modern science talks about material and numbers, but now that in quantum physics, they're discovering that the ancients were right, that this world is conscious, that what we're creating is basically a holographic universe. If you've ever read that book, it's really fascinating. Have strange dreams when you read that kind of stuff. But it's like that these questions of, if I leave this room, does it exist anymore? These questions that the Zen people asked many times. And so that's where we're saying that modern science is actually meeting that. And I really find that this Jung's work, understanding your ego and how it works and how it's really basically by default creating this projection, you're getting a glimpse of how God works, how the divine works. And it may seem simple, like, oh, I got to work on this annoying person, but you're seeing how this amazing consciousness that we have can create a reality where someone annoying can come in because that's inside of us already, that there's no external. That is where I find fascinating. And then also the dream work. I mean, we haven't even talked about that, but exploring your dreams. If you think about reality, the dream world, we create these worlds in our dreams every night. We're flying, driving cars, walking through walls, being in all these different places. What happened to all that stuff that in that dream, all those people? It's the same reality as we see now, like in our supposedly waking life, the woke life. The physical world is exactly the same quality as a dream, and then we start to see that. And now quantum physics has confirmed that. And science now a lot of the science has not evolved to that point yet. But that is really where the power starts, the life starts getting exciting, and where we can really change the world we live in.
Yeah, and there's an inherent contradiction in there, because according to scientific studies of our nervous system and our perceptual system, we are not experiencing the world directly. What we experience is an internal model that the brain creates for us. Mm-hmm. And it appears to us as if we're seeing things out there, but in essence, we are interacting with that internal model. Now, that undermines the whole idea of science in that materialistic sense. Because if we're not experiencing an objective world that's out there, we're seeing our own mind, essentially. So it goes back to that idea that it's a conscious universe. Consciousness is the foundation of everything. But most science still operates under the old paradigm that, there's an objective universe, and we try to keep our subjective experience out of it and just kind of measure it according to formulas and scientific data. But the science itself of our that we're kind of learning about our brain and the way it operates is essentially contradicting that. It's saying, no, what you're dealing with in any phenomena is your own mind. You're experiencing your mind. You cannot experience anything outside your mind.
Holy smokes. Well, there's so much of this that I want to dive so much deeper into, but I know that you have a hard stop at 3 or 2:55. Yes. I don't know what it is. I just want to thank you so much for coming on, for everything that you shared. I wish I could dive deeper into a lot of those things and throw more questions at you, so we'll have to get you back on the show. But
Yeah.
what I'll ask is just like, maybe just like with all of this stuff, someone's out there, they got a family and a screaming baby, and they need to put dinner on the paycheck or dinner on the table, get a paycheck. They're dealing with life. You're telling them about universe exists, doesn't exist, the walls. So this, what is your best piece of like life advice, either like a perspective or a tool or process?
I think a perspective would be that if you feel frustrated with your life, to first acknowledge that you're not limited by your current experience and that there's a change that you can create. And if you could just have even if you have a small little glimpse of that, start to work on a vision of what you want to create. I know that sounds really basic, but that's the divine in you. The divine in you wants to grow. Doesn't want to just survive. That's the ego. Your ego's going to be in survival mode. It's like awakening that part of your mind and allowing yourself to dream, allowing yourself, even if you don't know how it's going to happen, you have to plant the seed and just trust that you'll be led to opportunities and take them, and not be afraid of, stepping out of your comfort zone, because that's where everything is. And so just to know that you're not locked into anything, and that you can create whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I would only add that by the same token, all these ideas, although they appear fantastical in some way, they are very practical, because what they're telling us is what is the true nature of reality. And if we understand something about the true nature of reality, then our actions and our thoughts and our endeavors will hit the mark. They'll be right on target, instead of us kind of chasing after mirages and, kind of the illusory nature of the world. We'll be on real solid ground.
I love all that. It's basic, but you got to start from a base, and it's so fundamental. It's all, growing with the fundamentals and then elaborating from those solid principles. Where can people find more about you if they want to dive deeper?
Well, we have this great free class called Empowered Relationships, and it's really about the shadow. And so go to empoweredrelationshipsforwomen.com. Even if you're a man, you'll learn a lot from it. And it really is, we just kind of talk about the shadow and how relationships in our life reflect where we are and how to create a healthy life.
Awesome. And the new name, I was going to call it the Young Platform, but it's something else.
The Center of Jungian Positive Psychology, the Center of JPP.
Is that the website?
That's the website.
Yeah, because there's amazing programs on there too.
Yeah, we have a lot of, and our podcast is from the center on iTunes. So living from the center. Yeah.
I didn't see that, but that's awesome. All right, cool.
Great podcast.
Amazing.
So if you want to learn about this crazy stuff, we're hours and hours of time with it. I'm sure you have some really interesting topics like this on your podcast as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your work and what you're putting out in the world. And I look forward to speaking to you both again. Hopefully you'll come back on.
Yes. Thank you so much. Enjoy your yurt.
Yeah, will do. See you guys. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.